Welcome to Let's Get Writing. I'm your host, Catherine Taylor. Let's Get Writing is all about the writing process from inspiration to publication. And here is where we share the stories behind the stories. And my guest today says she was raised in the back of an avocado green station wagon. Well, I simply have to find out more about that. However, while working with Innu youth in Shehji, Labrador, this playwright, poet, and psychotherapist was inspired to write The Crooked Knife, which is her debut novel. Welcome, Jan Morrison, to Let's Get Writing. Hi, Jan. How are you?
I'm excellent. I'm very happy to be here.
Oh, it's a pleasure. And you're right now up in Labrador because,
Yeah.
I just want to share this with everyone. You're on your book tour, and I guess you just arrived there, did you?
I did. We arrived Tuesday evening. Yeah, we drove up. So too long, like 2 14-hour days of driving. But yay, we're here.
So we'll let everyone know that you started out from Nova Scotia and then
Right.
you went up to Quebec. And I've not too many people, I'm sure, have done that drive. Many of the people in our audience are from Newfoundland, and they would just take the ferry. But that's
Yeah,
quite a trip, quite an odyssey.
it is. It's a wonderful trip, and it's a good way to enter into the space that I wanted to be in because the book was inspired by my very first trip up to Northwest River with my partner. And before we even knew we were going to move there. So, so it was kind of like unrolling that all the way through.
Well, there it is. I thought I'd throw the cover up so people can see the cover of your book, The Crooked Knife. And what Jan, when I've been talking to you, what I've loved so much is that you've just published your first book, and it's been a similar experience for me. And we have more of our life lived than we have left to live. And I thought, wow, here we are. I guess we're knocking something off that bucket list that we've
Yeah,
always wanted to do.
that's
So so for you, has this always been a passion and something you did want to do?
yep. I I have a letter in my possession, not with me here, but at home, from a writer, Pamela Franco, who was a British writer who wrote wonderful stories, and I had just read her A Wreath for the Enemy, and I wrote her a letter when I was 13, maybe 14. And she wrote me saying that I wanted to be a novelist when I grew up. And I guess I've just grown up. It's taken me a while. But she
Although,
wrote me a 7-page handwritten letter back.
oh
So it
wow,
was so wonderful. I've always thought of that. Yeah.
it's something when someone takes the time to do that, and it
Yeah.
becomes part of your soul. And I'm so glad that you have done it, and you've introduced us to a wonderful character, Constable Nell Monroe. And let me tell you, I love her. She's sometimes she's got a lot to say, and she's her own woman, and she's determined, and she's a seeker of the truth. I adored her, and I hope that there are going to be more novels with her because she just really speaks to me. And I want to talk to you a little bit about that. In writing this book, you had lived and worked in Northwest River. Did I say, is it Northwest River? Did I say
Yeah.
that right?
Northwest River. Yeah.
West River. And you had also worked on the I have a hard time with this word, but Shehagi G Reserve. You can
Yeah.
correct. And so I'm assuming a lot of what this book is about came from your experiences there.
Yeah. That's right. Like Nell, I'm a come from away. Um, and again, like Nell, my partner's family is from here, from Northwest River. So they have very deep, long roots in this community. And I wanted to work while I was here, and I have a private practice usually as a psychotherapist, but you can't do that in a town of 500 relatives of your partner. So I decided I wanted to work on the reserve, and my first job there was with the Charles J. Andrew Treatment Center, working with families and youth. And then I also worked at the school in Sheheji. So, and that was my sweet spot. Going to that school just turned me on in a way I can't explain. I love the resilience of the kids there, and I just loved everything about it.
Well,
So I started to find out more and more. People say to me, "Well, what did you learn by living there and working there?" And I said, "I learned that I don't know anything." And
mhm.
it took me 5 years to learn that. And I'm a tough student, but 5 years to say, I really don't understand the complexity of life on a reserve, but I'm willing to at least try to struggle with it and try to learn some more about what's going on. So,
Yes, and in writing this book, this is you cover so many things in this book. And how did you feel becoming the voice and writing this story? As you're not in you, you're a come from away, as you say.
yeah,
What you the how did you feel confident in going forward with the story?
I felt confident because it's fiction, and I think fiction is sometimes the best way to tell the truth, oddly.
Mm,
And I never tried to appropriate anybody's voice that wasn't didn't know as much as I know. So, or that knew a different kind of thing than I knew. I didn't try to steal anybody's ideas or anything like that. I just thought, okay, this woman is a young, impetuous, seeker of truth, as you say, um, quick to a flashpoint, a
mm,
bit undisciplined. She has her own dark past that she has to deal with. And so that part I was completely comfortable with. What did she know? What did she understand of what did she make of what was happening? So yeah, no, I don't have a hard time with that part at all.
and the things you bring forward, the issues, there's many layers to your story, and as I'm drawn into them, and points come up and things come up, I'm thinking, how did you go about putting all this together? And you do it very smoothly. You really do draw us into the story. What was your approach to this? And tell
Well,
us a little bit about
I
Jan.
think I think that my approach was I was really angry. I was really angry at what was happening. I was angry with what was happening with kids on the reserve. I was angry at how vulnerable people were. I was angry at corporations and governments going after the resources of Labrador, and that is angry for settlers, Inuit, Métis, all the people that make up Labrador were being um, discounted. Their worth was being discounted as corporate greed wanted the resources they had. And it sort of all came together for me. And it came together with the people that I think are the most vulnerable, and that's the kids in Sheheji. So
Mm,
um, it was just starting to see the pattern of how that worked, how places are, typically it's called a resource curse. And
mhm,
it's noted mainly in third world countries where somebody comes in and there's a mine in South America and the people don't have a very strong government or uh, the social networks are a bit shaky. And what happens to destabilize that even further? Because um, when you destabilize families and make it hard for people to uh, have their truth spoken or get clean food and clean water, then it's easy to steal from them. And so that's the story I really wanted to tell. And I
mhm.
wanted to tell the story of someone who can't solve that crime. There's no There's no solving that crime, but what can she do in terms of what hope is there in that situation?
Mm.
So I don't know about you, but I write to find out what I'm thinking half the time. So I want to know what I was thinking about this, the information I'd taken in, the emotion I'd taken in, the beauty of the place, all of it. And I want to see, okay, how can I infect people with the same desire that I have for a kind of justice for the people that live in Labrador? So,
And these things you're writing about, I know we're talking Otter Falls, I know we're talking B Corp, and there are some similarities to
well, maybe a little.
what we're living right now. So, how did you feel? Because these are big issues to tackle. These are,
Yeah,
you feel a little, because you are representing the way of seeing it,
yeah,
and ways that I thought, well, sometimes we don't hear these voices that we hear in your book. And I thought, I wonder how Jan feels about putting this out there. You're going to send a copy to the premier, for example, came to mind.
well, would not bother me in the least.
Mhm.
That, part of my heroes in this community are the activists that I first met when I came here. One of the first things I ever did, just through kind of accident, was go into Happy Valley Goose Bay to the Supreme Court with a new friend that I'd met here, and got taken to a trial of these activists who'd been fighting Muskrat Falls and Nalcor. And I was hooked. I'm an old hippie. I love that kind of battle of the little guy. And these activists weren't young. I just was in awe of these wonderful aging warriors and what they were willing to do. And some of them ended up in prison. Some of them ended up in Newfoundland at the penitentiary for a short period of time. But still, I was like, really? That's how far you guys will go?
Mm.
I was pretty impressed. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that was quite an introduction. And you described yourself to me when we were talking as the proverbial bleep disturber. People can fill that word in. And, you're saying the eternal hippie, and that probably relates back to that green, that green car that you, how
Yeah.
did that at the beginning, you were raised in the back of an avocado green station wagon.
Yeah.
That probably leads back there somewhere. But
Yeah.
that view of how you would see it and how you would want to have a voice through this, it makes sense as you describe this, for
Mm.
sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, your way of telling the story through Nell, how did you create such a character, and why Nell? She's part of it. I mean, she's joined the
Yeah.
RCMP as a community constable. Did you, how come you didn't choose perhaps one of the people who are working against this, well, I guess the Inuit wouldn't be your voice maybe the same way, but
No.
how did you come up with Nell? Why her?
Well, she's obviously a large part of her is like me, though I never went into the RCMP and I don't think I ever would. But part of what she was a counselor in Shehaji, and she's kind of has a hard time keeping her mouth shut. So she is a younger version of me. She has a different life story. She started off as being inspired by me, and then she developed, as characters do, her own life.
Mhm.
And I think she was hurt as a child, and so she feels so much affinity for the vulnerable kids that she works with. And I think that's a good dynamic too. Sometimes is she works for an institution that she doesn't really believe in. And I think a lot of us have done that. We've worked for institutions because we don't know how else to give the help we want to give, but we're suspect of the institutions that we choose to work for, whether that's a school, working, we're politicians, journalists. I think all of those people are prone to get involved with institutions that they're innately suspicious of. So it's kind of an interesting contradiction.
Mhm.
And I think her boss, Matt Renault, he's really good at saying, "You made an allegiance to the police force, like do your job."
Yeah.
And I like his voice. He's maybe part of him is probably an older part of me that goes, "Yeah, quit kicking against the pricks and work the system,
Mhm.
work what you joined up for." So there's all those ways I think to deal. And her partner is a journalist. That's a hard place to be too. That's a difficult job these days. It's hard to be an independent journalist.
Very much so. Actually, one of my recent guests, Paul Palango, um, do you know Paul?
I listened to that interview. It was wonderful.
Well, he's on that path, and he's been sending me articles where he's been covered in not such a nice way. So when you stand up and speak your truth and go
Yeah,
out on that edge, you better be ready because the rocks are coming.
that's right.
Some of them are gonna hit you, you may
Yeah,
dodge, but you have to be strong and, you know, it is nice, and it's interesting that you would say she is there, but her allegiance deep down, I feel, is to the kids
it
and what
is to the kids.
they're going through.
Whenever she's in danger in the book, it's the kids that get her kind of through, thinking about them. I think that parallels me telling this story. Every time I felt like, oh, this is too much, or nobody wants to hear this, or quit your ranting, Morrison, or whatever my self talk was doing, I would say, this isn't for you. Like, when you write something or you create something, it doesn't matter if it's a play, a poem, a painting, whatever, you kind of have to let it be what it needs to be
Mhm.
and support it and not pick at it. We tend as artists to pick at our own art. And there comes a point we have to say, no, let it be itself.
And it takes courage. It does take courage at times to bring forth certain ideas that we're very close to or very passionate about
Sure.
that we know are not going to always be received the same way that you've received them. So I think in publishing, people forget that as they buy a book and read a book, the courage at times it takes for the author to actually write that book. And right now, I just want to take this opportunity to have you share an excerpt with us so people can have a sense of all this we've been talking about.
Okay. So I'll set you up a bit. This is a good chunk into the book, and Nell has uh, just come back to her house, which is on the beach in Labrador, and she's reflecting on things. But she goes out to the beach to get a little peace from her thoughts. The beach was dark, the sky clear with a sliver of moon. Because it was supper hour, there were no other dog walkers in sight. Beanie was off leash. One of the true treasures of living in a small village night right on the beach was that we hardly ever had to have him on a lead. It was always good to be on the beach. No matter the time of year or day, it was a beautiful sanctuary. Scanning the horizon, I was rewarded by a strange glimmer to the north. I either imagine northern lights when there are none in sight, or they are right there and I'm busily turning them into something else. This was the latter. My first thought, although I'd seen the crescent moon already, was that a full moon was rising. It appeared like a swirling cloud of smoke, except that a person knows you can't see smoke against a night sky. Then I realized what it was. The cloud started undulating, and the color changed from white to a luminous green. The colors hung like organza curtains in the breeze, and changed again to a deep rosy hue like a not quite ripe plum. I'm not one of those people who think seeing the northern lights is ho hum. Each time I see the northern lights, and it's been over a dozen times so far, I'm grateful for the sight. Gossamer silk fireworks without the bang, but plenty of awe. Beanie was off on a chase. I found a log, brushed off the snow, and sat down to watch the show. Some liked to whoop and holler and dance back at the lights, But that is not my way. I let my mind go blessedly blank and my senses come to the fore. I smelled the wood smoke that swirled from houses in the village, felt the soft driftwood log beneath me, heard huskies howling a ways down the beach, tasted the metallic air of a November night, and watched nature's greatest light show. It isn't quite meditation as I understand it, but it has the same effect. It makes me feel renewed and delighted at the world. After the stories I'd heard today, this was the best medicine. After the lights had pulsed and danced and dimmed, and my butt was nearly frozen, I looked for Beanie. I could hear him way down the beach, and I headed in that direction. He was barking at something toward the woods and the trail. Maybe he was responding to the crazy ass howling contest conducted by the huskies in the yard of one of the last houses on the beach. Or maybe he had found some creature that had flown or jumped up at the wrong moment. I loved walking on the lonely beach. I hadn't brought a flashlight. Maybe it was foolish, but flashlights always make me more scared of the dark. If I'd simply stayed in the dark long enough, my eyes adapted and I could see well enough. But not in the woods. No reference points and too many places a person could trip and fall. I could still hear Beanie barking his head off, but the huskies had quieted. They knew he was barking at air. Just then I saw Beanie near the entrance to the woods. As I moved forward to grab his collar, someone grabbed mine. They held me from behind, a gloved hand over my mouth. I bit down hard, but they kept a hold of me. Quit struggling. I'm not going to hurt you. I have a message for you. Leave this alone. It isn't any of your concern. If you don't, you might find those dumb kids you care so much about in worse trouble than they're already in. With that, the attacker pushed me hard enough that I landed on my hands and knees, and I slid across the snow's skittery surface. By the time I got up, the person or persons was gone, disappeared back into the woods, leaving me licking my wounds and holding on to my silly dog who'd come just in time to miss the show.
Well, I have to say one thing, you sure have that feel for the nature as well there, as well as creating suspense. It was beautiful to hear that description. I think as only someone who's lived there could really do.
Thank
Just
you.
yeah, beautiful. I've got your webpage up there. I was having a little trouble to bring things up here today for some reason, but I do have that up. And if people want to learn more about Jan, and I think from there they can go to your blogs. We have, I don't know if I can bring them up because this is really being tricky today. However, that's a really great place to get information from you, on you and to read more of your work. But I also want to mention to people that this is not all that you do. You are a playwright. I mentioned that in the beginning. These are musicals. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, yeah, I'm always just creating something, but yeah, I wrote a number of musicals with a very dear writing pal of mine named Malcolm Calloway, who's also a wonderful artist who lives in Chester, and his wife, Dawn Harwood Jones. She did the music part, sometimes with Jim Henman, who you might recognize the name of. And we did a number of musicals. The one that I guess went the farthest is what's called Death the Musical, karaoke at the Afterlife Bar and Grill. And it's about someone who dies and what happens and the bardo. And yeah, it was a lot of fun. And we did that at Neptune Theater in Halifax. So that was
Yeah.
wonderful, wonderful fun. And they all the plays I did premiered at the Chester Playhouse, which burned
That
down last year.
it burned down. I
Yeah,
didn't
it did.
know
It's
that.
just
Yeah, that is
heartbreaking. But anyway, they're rebuilding it
good.
because the show must go on.
Wow.
And yeah, and we did Death the Musical and Mrs. Finney's Hat and uh, Shroom, the last musical, it's called. And we did a play with music called Fields of Crimson that was inspired by two war artists from Canada. and it was inspired by their story of meeting, and that was a lot of fun. Hmm. And I did a different business with two of my closest best friends, Carol Rose and Linda Jackson, and we ran a company called Catchword Productions for maybe 35 years. We killed people in hotels.
I may have been on one of these trips. Did you ever do it in Sackville, New Brunswick?
We did do one in Sackville, New Brunswick, on the train. It started on the train.
I was there. I was the corporate spokesperson for Via Rail for the region, and murder mystery tours. So we have met before, but we just don't know that we've
We
met.
don't.
I did that first one, and it was, I forget the inn now, the Sackville Inn.
It was Marshlands Inn.
Marshlands Inn, and we got on the train, and there was a murder. I have been part of your work.
There you go.
Well, we're almost out of time. I very quickly want to put up some of your art, and hopefully it'll go up there. And because and this was at the library.
This was a highlight for me. This is the librarian at the Northwest River Volunteer Library, and she is putting the little pocket in the back of my book to hold the date due card. Her name is Wendy Mitchell, and she's just fantastic. And she said, "I'm going to take this book out right away." And she said, "But I'm going to buy one too."
These are great moments as writers. And here's some of your artwork. So very busy in October with artwork, and then you're part of the NaNoWriMo in November. I think a lot of writers are, and so on and so forth. So Jan, we're going to have to wrap, but I want to thank you so much. And I want to thank everyone for joining us. And please check out Jan on her website, please.
Okay. And can I just say that we're going to be tomorrow night launching at the Labrador Interpretation Center in Northwest River at 7:00, and on Wednesday night in St. John's Wednesday evening in St. John's at the Battery Cafe. So, yeah, I just lost my mind for a minute. From 5 to 7 on the 15th.
But again, thank you so much. And
thank you so much. This was so much fun.
And I look forward to reading more about Nell. Thank you for joining us, everyone. And stay tuned with Let's Get Writing. We may have more great stories to come.